Hey everyone, my name is Jene, and tonight we're going to do a WIP and chat and question of the day. Question of the day will be the first part of the WIP and chat. This will give you the opportunity to answer the question, and no answer is incorrect. This way it just gives all of us an idea of what you would do in those scenarios. Also remember that there will be a giveaway, but it is a random giveaway. That means it could be in 2 weeks, it could be 4 weeks, it all depends. Now there was one random winner, which was Linda Garcia, and again, congratulations Linda, your package is on the way, I promise. And there's a little extra there just because I felt so bad that it has taken so long to get it to you. By saying that though, guys, I just wanted to remind you that it is random, and I promise you there will be more questions of the day and random winners. So by saying that, here is the scenario. Let's say that you and your significant other or a good friend decide to go to a movie. You have dinner first, and then you go to the theater, you buy your tickets, you get some popcorn and some drinks, and you head over to the theater that is assigned to your movie. You find 2 seats that you feel is going to be perfect to watch that movie. You arrive early, and as you're sitting there chit-chatting away, you notice that the theater is starting to fill up. Just before the movie starts, 6 teenagers decide that they're going to sit in the row right in front of you. Those 6 teenagers are talking loud and, of course, have their cell phones on. The movie begins, but the chit-chat and the cell phones remain. What do you do? So here are your 4 answers. 1, you sit in your seat patiently and trying to enjoy the movie under the circumstances. 2, you tap them gently on the shoulder and politely ask them to respect everyone else in the theater and quiet down. 3, you start throwing popcorn at the back of their heads, hoping that that will alert them to shut up. 4, you get up out of your seats and you find 2 seats that are in a quieter section of the theater. So, what would you do? I'll tell you what I'd do, because I've done it. I've thrown popcorn at the back of their heads, and they eventually figure out, maybe I should shut up. Yeah, maybe you should. Anyway, it's not like we spend a ton of money to go watch a movie and listen to a bunch of teenagers yapping. So, movies are just way too expensive to sit and have to listen to a bunch of teenagers. And or what is really annoying is when somebody is texting on their phone and, their phone lights up the entire theater practically. So yeah, that's annoying. Anyway, let me know what you would do. I also have one other question for you. Now this you don't have to answer unless you want to, and it's not part of the question of the day. This is going to be part of the WIP and chat. And the question is, when you were growing up as a child, did you have any childhood fears, such as being afraid of the dark, snakes, spiders, things like that? Because that's what we're going to talk about today. So grab your whips and grab something to drink, and let's get started. All right, guys, so I'm going to be spending some time with you and going over some childhood memories. And if my sister's watching, she's probably going to laugh so hard that she's going to pee her pants. So, sis, if you're watching, I hope you enjoyed these memories. Anyway, we used to live in a city called Santa Ana, California when we were little. And one day my father decided that he wanted to go see a movie, and my mother didn't want to go. So he decided to take me and my middle sister Kim with him. Now we went to a drive-in movie. Oh, I love drive-in movies. Do you guys remember those? They were the best. You had a playground out there. You had wonderful food. 2 movies for the price of one. It was great. You know, you could sit in your car, you could fall asleep, and you wouldn't be disturbing anyone. It was just really great to experience a drive-in movie if you haven't experienced it. Anyway, my father decided that he was going to take us girls. And the reason why he decided to do that is the first movie that was playing was for kids. So he figured, well, if I brought the 2 girls with me, they can watch the first movie and enjoy it and then probably fall asleep in the feature film. That was his idea. So when he went and approached my mother and told her what he was going to do, she was all in for it. She's like, yeah, go ahead and take the girls. He didn't mention what the feature film was to my mother, and it was actually a horror movie. Now, let me explain something. My father loved antique cars. He was really into the old Plymouths and the old Dodges. In this movie, I believe the car was a Dodge. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it was. Anyway, I was about 6 years old when my father took me to this movie. This was in the late 1970s, and the title was called The Car. When we got to the theater, my father always told us to go ahead and play in the playground, and he was going to get hot dogs and some snacks and some drinks so that when we watched the first movie that, you know, we'd fill our bellies and watch the movie and have a great time. After the first movie was over, he told us girls, he says, you know what? You girls go ahead and go to the playground, and then when the movie starts, come back to the car, and then you guys can go ahead and fall asleep. Now, we had our pillows and our blankets with us, so he was really hoping that we would fall asleep through the feature film. So when the movie started, that's exactly what we did. We ran back to the car, we got in the back seat of the car, and we grabbed our blankets, we put the blankets around us, and we put the pillows on the side of the car, and you saw 2 girls with our heads, you know, on the side of the car, but we never really shut our eyes. No, we wanted to see what the second movie was all about. Let me tell you, if you haven't seen this movie and you're into spooky, scary movies, look it up. It's called The Car. If you're not into that stuff, don't look it up and don't watch it, because believe me, it will freak you out. Even in today's time, that movie may freak you out. I have to say, when directors and movie makers make these types of movies, what really makes the movie is the music. So for instance, if you were to see Jaws and you heard the music before the attack happened, you knew that that was going to happen. There was no avoiding it. And that music was very eerie to begin with. So when you heard it, you knew, uh-oh, something was going to happen. Shark's going to eat someone, right? Same thing here with the car. The weird music, it was a very sketchy type of music, would come on. And then this car had a very unusual horn to it. It wasn't a car horn or what we would consider a car horn. It was more like a big tractor trailer type horn, something that you would hear going down the road and passing a big truck. That's the type of horn it was. And when you heard the music and all of a sudden you can hear that horn going, you're like, uh-oh, something's gonna happen. And when that movie started, the car, it was like immediately that car was going to do something. And it did. That was the weird part of the movie. And I think my father was a bit horrified to know that it started out like that. Of course, me and my sister in the back, we're watching this, right? We're actually watching this. And the problem is, I couldn't just fall asleep because I had to make sure that something happened to the car at the end. Believe me, this movie terrified me to the point where even at my age now, I'm 54, even at my age now, I can tell you exactly what happened in that movie. And I've seen it about 2 years ago. I saw it again. And looking at it now, it's not as scary. But when I was watching it, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this scene. Yep, and I remember that scene. So nowadays, I can sit down and watch a scary movie and it doesn't bother me. But when I was 6 and 7, even into my late teens, scary movies would really affect me. In fact, I would have nightmares for weeks after seeing a movie like that. Anyway, after the movie was over, my father took us home. It was probably around midnight to 12:30 in the morning. And as we were coming home, my father looked at both of me and my sister and said, you know what, please don't tell your mother what you just saw. Because he knew at that point that we had seen the entire movie. And me and my sister were just looking at each other going, okay, right? So when we got home, my mother decided she was going to put us to bed. It was pretty late. And she was really surprised that we weren't sleepy, that we were wide awake. And so she takes us to the room and she starts getting us ready for bed. And I remember clearly telling my mother, I'm not sleeping by that window. And she looked at me and she was, well, why not, Pumpkin? Now, that's what she used to call me, was Pumpkin, when we were growing up. And I looked at her and I said, I'm not sleeping by the window. Well, why not? I said, well, because that car's going to come get me. She looked at me, she says, what car? Well, the car, it's going to come get me. And she says, what are you talking about? I said, well, the car from the movie. And she said, okay. She says, I promise you that there's no car that's going to come get you. I promise you that. No, I'm not sleeping by that window. And she says, okay, how about if we do this? You get in bed, I tuck you in, and I leave the door open just a crack so that you can see the light from the hallway. Nope, I'm not sleeping by the window. My mother was getting a little frustrated because she had no idea what happened. And she said, okay, you get in bed, I tuck you in, and I leave the door opened all the way and leave the hall light on. That way it brings in enough light in the room so that you're not afraid. Okay, I'll do that. She says, great. So she got me in bed, tucked me in, turned off the light and left the door open and left the hall light on. A few minutes later, I could hear my mother and my father having a discussion. My mother said to him, what the hell did you show them? And he's like, what do you mean? And she says, your daughter is scared to death. She will not sleep without the light in the hall on and the door wide open. She told me that she doesn't want to sleep next to the window because the car is going to come get her. And he goes, oh. So my mother said, what movie did you show them? And he says, well, I told you the truth. The first movie was a child's movie and they really enjoyed it. And I was hoping that they would fall asleep before the feature film came on. He says, I made sure that they both were playing hard in the playground. And then I told them to come back when the movie started. And they did. And they got their blankets and their pillows and they laid down. But he said, I had absolutely no idea until the middle of the movie that they were still awake and they were watching the movie. She says, I didn't ask about that. I asked you what the title of the movie was. So he finally told her. And he says the title of the movie is called The Car. My mother knew exactly which movie it was, and she went off on him. I don't think my father ever did that again. And she said, you should never have taken those kids to see that movie. And he goes, well, I really thought that they would fall asleep. And he goes, and my mother said to him, are you serious? 2 kids in a drive-in going to sleep? Anyway, she didn't speak to my father for a few days, I think. I can't really remember that part of it, but I can tell you this. I didn't sleep without a light on and without my door open for at least 2 weeks. At least. And as I said, even now I look back and I'm thinking, I would never take my small children to see something like that. But his intentions were not for us to watch it. Totally understand that, but yeah, it kind of backfired on him. Anyway, even growing up as a teenager, I had a really hard time watching spooky movies, and my mother was big on spooky movies. She loved them. One of the movies that she wouldn't allow me to watch was The Exorcist. Even though I bugged her about it, she's like, you are not watching this movie until you're 18. And I remember saying to her, well, why not? And she says, well, every spooky movie that you watch, you have nightmares and you go on for weeks without turning off your light or making sure that things aren't, under your bed. She said, no, you're not going to watch The Exorcist. It is a very spooky movie, and it's just not something that I want you to see. Okay. Now, when I turned about 15 years of age, my mother was watching HBO. She was going through all the movies that were posted for that day, and she saw one movie that she wanted to watch. And she said to me, she says, I think you're going to have to go to bed early tonight. And I'm like, no. I said, I don't go to bed until 10. I said, what's the problem? She says, well, I really want to see this movie. Okay, well, why can't I watch it? She says, well, because it's going to give you nightmares. I said, Mom, I'm 15 years old now. I think I'm more than capable of watching a spooky movie without having nightmares. She kind of looked at me for a second. She's okay. Like, it can't be that bad, right? The movie was Nightmare on Elm Street. And believe me, I had no clue about this movie, and she warned me about it. Now, here's a side note for those of you that have seen or have not seen Nightmare on Elm Street. Johnny Depp's first movie was in Nightmare on Elm Street. Johnny Depp. I can watch Johnny Depp for hours. But at the time, I didn't know who he was. Anyway, we watched that movie, and once the movie was over, I just kind of got up and I said, well, I got to go to bed. And my mother looked at me and she says, are you okay? I said, I'll be fine. She said, okay. Now, we lived in a small house, and my bedroom was upstairs, and I turned the light on to the stairs, and I got upstairs. The light to the bedroom was around the corner, and I moved as fast as I could around the corner to turn the light on. And I turned off the light on the stairs, but I left the light in my room on. And it's a fairly big room, but yeah, I left the light on, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I am not going to be able to sleep, because if I do, heaven forbid, Freddy Krueger is going to come in my life. So yeah, that was not a good experience. And I'm not much into the blood and gore, and I still am not. I like the spooky thriller type movies. I'm not into the blood and guts like Nightmare on Elm Street or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Friday the 13th. Those are the type of movies I don't like, and I won't watch them. But I do like things like suspenseful thrillers. And a couple of movies that I've recently seen that I really liked, even though they're classified as horror movies, I wouldn't say that they're that bad, is Escape Room. I thought that was a really good movie. Anyway, I'm kind of going off track. Sorry. One of my ultimate favorite spook movies is the original Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis. I don't remember all the names, but the reason why I like that movie is, again, it's the music that really sets the tone and really is what freaks you out. Because if you were to take the music out, you can't anticipate what's going to happen next. And your imagination really doesn't run free. So, yeah. So that was one thing that happened during my life. Oh, I forgot to tell you. When I did turn 18, going back to The Exorcist, when I did turn 18, I believe it showed in the month of September, the end of September. And I noticed that it was coming on TV, and I said to my mother, I said, look, The Exorcist is coming out. And she's like, she just kind of looked at me and shook her head. And I'm like, Mom, you said that I could watch it when I was 18. You said, you promised. And she said, okay, we'll sit down and watch it. She said, but I'm telling you, it's going to give you nightmares. Well, no, I can handle it. I'll be fine. So we sat down with a big bowl of popcorn and we started watching The Exorcist. Oh my God, that was the biggest mistake. I should never have seen that movie. It was horrible. I had no idea about what was going to happen. She never really told me about it. I just kind of heard off and on from friends and other people around me. But when I saw that girl's head spinning, I thought, okay, that's enough for me. I did. I got up in the middle of the movie and I'm like, I can't watch this anymore. And she's like, I told you. And I'm like, Mom, you should have told me about the head spinning and the throw up. That was just a little too much for me. So anyway, that was my experience with horror movies, especially at a young age. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because I have a huge fear of the dark. I've always been afraid of the dark. I don't like to be in dark areas. I don't like to be in dark rooms. Yeah, I'm scared of it, and I can't explain really why. I have forced myself a number of times to go to like haunted houses that, you know, they put you in dark rooms and they touch you and stuff like that. I have forced myself to do that even though I knew how I was going to react to it. Even at my age now, I probably wouldn't do it again. Only because I know I can do it, but it's something that I don't really want to go through. Even at a small age, there are other things that can terrify you, even though some people might think that it's fun. So that is the next story I'm going to tell you. But I'm going to go ahead and pause the camera because my clip is ready to end. And then we'll start on that one and we'll be right back. Okay, so the next story I'm going to share with you, I was probably around the same age, 6 years old, 7. And my mother used to work for a company that would buy into packages for amusement parks such as Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, Magic Mountain. Every year, the first week of December, she would get passes to go to Disneyland. Now, how this would work is it wouldn't just be one company, it would be several companies buying into these packages. And they would give out passes to their employees, and these passes would allow you to get into the park and go on as many rides as you want, as many times as you want. Now this is going to age me, guys, because back in the day, Disneyland was ran by ticket books. So if you wanted to go on a ride, you had to buy a ticket book. You had to pay to get into the park as well, but all the rides were done with tickets. So when they got these passes, you didn't have to get a ticket book. You could just go wherever you wanted to go and go on any ride you wanted, right? So you'd think that a child my age would love to go to Disneyland. And to be honest, I did love Disneyland. I thought it was great, right? But there was a catch to it. My mother loved Disneyland, and the first ride she would always take us to was the ride I was most terrified of. Now, let me explain something. Even today, I would never go on a roller coaster. I'm afraid to death of them. I'm not a fan of super fast rides, and my mother knew this, so she would never force me to go on things like the Matterhorn or Space Mountain, things like that. No. But there was always one ride that we had to go on, and it had to be the first ride that we would go on. And it was the Pirates of the Caribbean. Now, some of you are probably going, Jene, really? You're afraid of that ride? At 6 years of age, yes, I was. I was terrified of this ride. And let me explain why. But as I explain it, I'm just going to kind of go over what I remember of it, because I haven't been to Disneyland since I was 12. So things could have changed by now, but when we went, you would go into line, and as you were going into line, you could hear the music going, right? And it would go like this. Yo-ho, yo-ho, a pirate's life for me. I don't remember the rest of the words. I know, to quit my day job, right? Yeah. Anyway, so we would stand in line and we would hear that music going constantly. And you could see on the other side people getting off of the boats, but the boats never really stop. They just kind of slowly slink around the corner. And you would get into the boat as it's moving, but it's going slow, so you wouldn't fall into the boat or anything like that. Now, my mother always made sure she sat next to me. And we would get into the boat, we would sit down, and the music, yo-ho, yo-ho, a pirate's life for me. My version is this. Yo-ho, yo-ho, get me off this thing. Because I didn't want any part of it. Anyway, the boat would start, and you would start going through the first portion of the ride, which, believe me, I can't remember. Why? Because I was super focused on what was coming up next, and that was the Pit of Despair. So some of you might going, what are you talking about? Well, if you've not been on the Pirates of the Caribbean in Disneyland, not Disney World, because they're totally different, there was always what I called the Pit of Despair. And that was the first hill that you went down. It was pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And just before the entrance of the Pit of Despair, on top of the entrance, I should say, was a skull and crossbones. And that skull was talking to you and basically telling you, beware, turn around, or you might die. Now, for a 6-year-old, it was kind of like, oh my God, get me off. So I can't remember from the time that I climbed into the boat until the time that I reached the Pit of Despair, because I was so super focused on that particular part of the ride, I couldn't tell you what was going on around me at that point. But you would start slowly getting to the Pit of Despair, and that talking skull is just talking away, just telling you, hey, don't go down here. You could actually hear the rushing water as you're approaching it. So you knew something was going to happen. And my mother thought this was the greatest ride in the world. But to an adult, I can see why. Because it is beautiful. I'm being honest. What I can remember, it's gorgeous. But getting through the pit of despair was a nightmare for me. Because it was pitch black. And I have a fear of darkness. So when you go through the pit of despair, you can actually hear people screaming. It's not very fast from what I can remember, but you can still hear people screaming because you don't know where you're going, and all of a sudden you just drop. Once you get through the pit of despair and you can see daylight again, or at least you can see light, you start going through what I call the fun section. And you see all the barmaids dancing, all the pirates drinking, music is going, and it's really loud, but it's still very enjoyable. And I'll tell you, what I can remember of it, I just remember thinking, wow, that looks so fun. And everyone is just smiling, and of course they're dancing and having a great time. But you also can hear rushing water again, which is another hill that you go down. But at least this hill is shorter and you can see where you're going. You can still see everything. So that next hill takes you down to the actual pirate fights. So it's a battle between two pirate ships. And as you're going through there, the cannonballs are going off, water spraying everywhere. It is beautiful, loud, but beautiful. And then the ride ends. You go back through the back end of it and you climb out of the boats and it's done. That's a Pirate of the Caribbean, at least what I can remember of it. But yeah, my mother, she would always make sure that that was the first ride we would go on. And I always was terrified of that ride. It could be because of the dark hill and the talking skull. I just remember that the most out of that entire ride. So I was telling my kids one day, hopefully I can go back to Disneyland, and that would probably be the first ride I would go on, oddly enough. I just want to be able to re-experience that particular ride as an adult. Call me crazy, but yeah, I always think about if I ever go to Disneyland or to Disney World, that would probably be the first ride I would go on. Now, I really loved It's a Small World, although the repetitiveness of the song kind of got to you after a while, but it was beautiful. All the dancing dolls and stuff, it was just gorgeous. And oddly enough, my favorite ride was the haunted house. I don't know why. I thought it was funny. It was comical in some ways. But the weird thing about this ride is every time we would go on it, it would break down somewhere on the ride where we would be stuck 5 to 10 minutes. The longest time we were stuck on that ride was about 35 minutes. And we were right at the mirrors. And if you looked in the mirror, you saw a ghost that was sitting next to you. But if you looked next to you, you didn't see it. And as a child, you always wondered, how did they do that? At one point, I believe it was the time that we were stuck for 35 minutes. My sister Kim thought that it would be kind of fun to get out of the car and check out the mirrors. I don't think she did. I don't remember if she did, but I remember her telling me, I think it would be a really good idea. Let's go check it out. And I'm like, I didn't want to get in trouble. I'm like, no, I'm not going there. So yeah, the haunted house was my favorite ride. Now my sisters, they liked the Matterhorn and Space Mountain. And I couldn't do Space Mountain. Space Mountain, not only was it a roller coaster, but it was also in the dark, and me and dark and roller coasters, I just don't get along with them, so I wouldn't go on it, but my sister said it was really fun. The other amusement park that we would go to was Six Flags Magic Mountain. Now, have any of you watched National Lampoon's Vacation, the original one? You know, they were going to Wally World. That's Six Flags Magic Mountain. And every time I see that movie and watch the end, I just kind of laugh because I'm like, yeah, I know that park really well. Now, Six Flags Magic Mountain was probably the first amusement park in California that I know of that you only paid to get into the park, but you can go on any rides as many times as you want. It didn't matter. You didn't have to have ticket books. And we really loved going there for that reason. But again, I wouldn't go on roller coasters, and I didn't particularly care for all the fast rides. One of the rides that I enjoyed the most was called the Jetstream. It was a boat that looked kind of like a plane. I believe 6 people can fit into it. And the more people that you could get in the boat, the faster the boat would go when it went down the main hill. So I really liked that ride. I thought it was fun, and we would go on it constantly. At one point, the controller was kind of looking at us like, okay guys, can you please go somewhere else for a while? So we did, and my sisters and my stepbrother, they decided that they wanted to go on the Revolution, and I'm like, I am not going on that. It was a roller coaster, and on top of all of that, it was one with a big loop that you had to go upside down, and as you were going through the loop, halfway mark where you were literally upside down, another stream of cars would go straight through it. And I thought, I ain't going on that. No way. So their solution, I wait for them at the exit of the ride, and then when they were done with the ride, we could all go back on whatever else that was out there that we all enjoyed going on. And I thought, okay, I can do that. I stood there and waited for 2 hours for them. And I couldn't figure out why it was taking so long. Why is it taking so long for them to come out of that ride? Little did I know that they went on the ride 3 times before I spotted them coming out of the exit. They found a way to get back into line without going through the exit. So they made me sit there and wait for 2 hours. I couldn't believe it when I found out that they did that. I'm like, that is just rude. But I guess in some ways I can understand why they would do it. Anyway, I was quite upset with them though, I would say that. So one thing I wanted to share with you about Six Flags Magic Mountain is that particular park had, at the time that we were going there, built the Colossus. And the Colossus, when it was first built, was the biggest and the longest wooden roller coaster in North America. And of course, everybody was really proud of that, and they wanted to go on the Colossus. For me, there's no way I'm going on that ride. So if you are interested in finding out a little bit about Six Flags Magic Mountain and see the Colossus on TV, go back and watch National Lampoon's Vacation, the original one, and at the end you will actually see them on the roller coaster, and you'll see why I didn't want any part of that ride. My sisters loved it, but no thank you. Oh boy. There was one other amusement park that we would go to, but we didn't go to it very often. It was called Knott's Berry Farm. And it was more for little kids. One of the things that I remember the most about that particular park was the bear jamboree. And you would go into a big theater type setting, and all these mechanical bears, they would have their instruments, they would sing, they would talk to you. And you, as a child, you really thought that they were real bears, although you find out later they're not. One thing about Knott's Berry Farm, they did have their rides. They had a log ride, and I didn't really like that ride, to be honest. As I got older, I wasn't as afraid of it, but it was a lot like the Jetstream. You would come flying out of this part of the ride where you're going down a hill and you're going really fast. And of course, the more people in the boat, the faster the boat would go. But one of the things that I remember the most of Knott's Berry Farm is the Bear Jamboree, and they have the best jams and jellies and syrups ever made. Now, I don't know if Knott's Berry Farm still exists, but I do know that in the West Coast you can still buy the jams and the jellies and the syrups. So sis, if you're watching, you might want to pick some up for me. Send them my way, because I do miss that. Now, I'm going to tell you one more story before ending, and that is about my son. My youngest son, David, he loves fast rides. And I don't know where he got it, because he surely didn't get it from his mother. And I don't think he got it from his father, but I mean, I could be wrong. Anyway, in Washington State, they have their state fair. It's called the Puyallup Fair. And I promise you I won't sing the jingle, but I do remember it. The last year that I lived in Washington, my sons wanted to go to the fairgrounds. And I thought, okay, we'll go. That year was the first year for a ride called the Extreme Scream. Now, you can look it up in YouTube and it'll show you this ride, but it's called the Extreme Scream. And I remember thinking to myself when I walked past it, I'm like, oh my gosh, no way. You couldn't pay me enough to get on that ride. But my youngest son really wanted to go on this ride. And I'm like, David, there is no way. I am not going on that ride. And he was telling me, well, you know, maybe Dad will take me. I said, you're going to have to ask your dad. I'm not going to ask him. You're going to have to ask him. So he runs up to his dad and he goes, Dad, you think you can take me on this ride? I really want to go on it. Now, I saw his face. Now, at this time we were separated. I saw his face and he looked at me like, oh, hell no. I don't want to go on that. And I looked at him like, I was shaking my head. No, I'm not going on it either. So he finally agreed to take David on this ride. So he paid for the tickets and they waited in line. It was a very popular ride given the fact it was brand new. Anyway, when David approached the front of the line, they always have that section where it says you have to be this high to be able to be on the ride. He was like maybe a quarter inch away from that. And I was kind of hoping that the guy was going to let him on because it was going to break his heart that he couldn't get on this ride. So when he said something to my ex, I could see that my ex had said something back to him, and he went ahead and let my son on the ride. And I'm like, oh, thank you, because that would have been not a good scenario. My son is autistic, and he would have thrown a major fit if he couldn't get on that ride. Anyway, so they strapped him in, and my ex was sitting there looking at me. I could see the terror in his face. He was not happy he had to be on that thing. Anyway, so they strapped David in, they got my ex in, and how the ride works is that it shoots up in the air, and then it falls back down, and then it shoots back up in the air again, and then it holds you. It actually pulls you up all the way to the top, and it'll hold you there for about a minute. And you can see all around the total park, everywhere. I mean, you can see the highway, everything. But it'll hold you there for about 60 seconds. Then all of a sudden it clicks, and it free falls all the way back down, and then it shoots you back up in the air again. And then it starts slowly coming back down. Anyway, how it prepares you is it unlocks, so it lifts up a little bit, right? And then it kind of bounces I don't know why it bounces, but it does. It'll bounce a little bit. And there's my son swinging his legs back and forth, and he's just got this big smile on his face. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, that smile's going to come off your face real fast. This ride, you could hear it. You could hear the actual motor or engine preparing to propel this thing up in the air. And all of a sudden, it just shot up in the air. And my son's face he went from a smile to, oh my God, I thought he was going to throw up. But it came back down, and he was ghostly white when I saw him coming back down. I thought, oh no. It went right back up in the air again. And anyway, at the end of the ride, I think he was shocked. I think he was in shock. They got the straps off of him and everything. They were asking him if he was okay, and he just kept shaking his head. Yes, he was okay. My ex-husband was totally green. I really thought he was going to throw up. They both stumbled off of the ride, and then they got to the exit. And I remember looking at my son, David, and I said, so what did you think? And he goes, Mom, that was the best ride ever. Can I go on it again? I'm like, oh, I don't think so. He looked at his dad, and his dad looked at him, and he goes, no. I was like, that didn't scare you enough? And now you want to go back on it? Oh my gosh, you are crazy. And I think he was 6 years old when he went on that ride. Oh my gosh. I was like, no, kid, you are not going back on that. So I'm really glad that I wasn't the one on there, because I would have thrown up probably about 4 times, and I probably would have pooped my pants. But that's just me. So anyway, guys, my clip is getting ready to end again, and I think it's time for me to go ahead and close the video. I hope you enjoyed the stories, and let me know what you think. Let me know about your childhood fears, and don't forget to put your question of the day answers down below in the comments. So by saying that, everyone, I'm going to bid you adieu. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know by hitting that thumbs up. I would greatly appreciate it. And again, if you're new to the channel or just stopping by, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. If you do decide to subscribe, please don't forget to hit that indication bell. That bell is going to let you know when I've uploaded my next wacky video. By saying that, everyone, please remember, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy. Again, my name is Jene. Thank you for spending some time with me tonight on the review. We'll talk again real soon. Bye for now.